I'm Raymond, and this year marks my 28th birthday. I am employed in sales for a reputable large company. I believe that I perform rather well in sales. This is a result of my hard work at work, as I have never really worked hard at anything else. My father departed due of a divorce when I was too little to remember him, and my mother passed away last year. But ever since my mom passed away, I've been lacking motivation in all aspects of my life, including work. I feel like I'm merely going through the motions at work every day. Something happened after my girlfriend and I broke up. Raymond, the section head, wants to see you in the office. The clerk called to me as soon as I got back from an appointment outdoors. I've never had a good relationship with the department head, mostly because he doesn't understand that I lack motivation. Even though I was the top contract maker last month, it appears he doesn't like it. Dealing with him is a headache since he picks disputes over the most insignificant things. This is Raymond. Could I please enter? I went to the manager's office and knocked on the door. The head of the section and the manager gave me a harsh look. Can you explain what this is about? I was working on an annual contract with a major client when the department head put it in front of me. I had just delegated the task to a junior team member at the team leader's request. Put another way, it was an undertaking that was beyond of my control. Why would you give this to a junior student in such a half-finished state? That is careless. The section head began yelling at me as I was considering what was going on. He believes he can achieve what he wants by threatening and screaming at me. It's obvious that the department leader, who appears to be misinformed, wants to place all the responsibility for this failure on me. All he's saying is negative things about me. After the contract went from me to the junior, I believe the section head likely wanted to take credit for it as his own achievement. The junior came to me the other day and told me he felt that his job had been stolen, which is proof of this. If it worked, it would be to his credit. If not, he could get rid of me, which would be a pain in his side. Very sly. I remained silent as my boss proceeded to chastise me. The manager did nothing but observe. Finally, he gave me my notice of transfer. You're being transferred. Demotion to a client-centered factory was the new task. I accepted the notice without question since I was so exhausted. After that, I looked up the location of my transfer and said, Alaska. There, is it not freezing? My remark caused the manager's veins to burst in his forehead and ended the stillness. Is that all you have to say? The manager then gave me an hour and a half of lectures. Man, this time of year, being seconded. How on earth did you accomplish that? When the factory manager came to see me, he laughed and said this while carrying the transfer notification. I mean, it was a strange time for a transfer. Anyone would think I did something wrong. The factory where I was posted was in the suburbs of Anchorage, Alaska. Being from Los Angeles, I detest the cold. It's freezing for me, even though it's the south of Alaska. There was no trace of summer at all, even though it was almost here. I'm excited to collaborate with you. I've been informed that I will oversee general affairs. Since I have experience in sales, I rely on your direction and rigorous education. Everyone applauded warmly as I bowed deeply and entered the office. I recall that when they responded, I felt relieved and my shoulders relaxed. I was given a room in an old apartment complex as company housing. I've heard that a large number of workers and students who are away from home reside here. The room next to me was occupied by a young man. I suppose he's quite the player since even though we've just said hello a few times, he always appears to be with a different woman. Perched on a hill, the apartment offers a distant view of the sea. The city lights are stunning at night, and my favorite thing to do after work is open a can of beer and enjoy the view from the balcony. I saw a few kids with paper lanterns in their hands today as I made my way back up the hill to the apartment. It was that fleeting moment in the day between dusk and dawn. I had the impression that I had entered a new dimension. It wasn't until I saw a big bamboo decoration in the daycare's playground halfway up the hill that I realized it was July 7, the day of the Star Festival. The kids are presumably attending a festival. I opened the door to my apartment, thinking that I undid my necktie and went straight to the refrigerator to get a can of beer. I immediately stepped outside to the balcony and uncorked the drink. On the slope, paper lanterns were swaying in different directions. The children's singing caught my attention as they sang about tassels on bamboo. It's the Star Festival. It had an odd vibe to it and sounded like a kid's song I've never heard before. It's not that horrible to learn little by little about the unknown parts of our region. That was the first time I had thought like that since my transfer. Someone was knocking on my door at that very moment. Nobody in this place knew me well enough to come see me. Without checking the intercom, I opened the door, assuming it was the landlord or the factory manager. A beautiful woman dressed in a robe stood in front of the door. She carried a paper lantern and was dressed in a robe of white and blue. She looked down shyly and sung in a soft, hesitant voice the song the kids had been singing before. For the Star Festival, bamboo, let's rejoice. Please, I need a candle. She buried her face in my chest and put her arms around my neck the next second. I hope she'll pardon me for putting my arms around her waist out of impulse when I'm hugged by a stunning woman in a robe that I just met. I'm shocked when she says, "I want more than just a candle. I want your best," in a somewhat sultry voice. She's not someone I know, though, I assure you. I had to say something for her honor, and I said, "I think you've got the wrong guy." I hope she'll forgive me for speaking louder than I meant to, but I was scared too. "Aren't you Jack?" She looked up at me, actually seeing at my face for the first time, startled by my voice. "Well, not at all. My name is Raymond," I said with a sardonic grin. It seems that she thought I was her boyfriend. In an instant, her face flushed beet red. I could see her long eyelashes trembling around her wide-open eyes up close. "I apologize so much. It appears that I made a mistake," she said, pulling away from me in a hurry. At that precise moment, the door from the adjoining room opened, revealing a happy pair, with the young woman referring to the man as Jack. I realized then what was going on. The sight of the two of us froze the beauty in a robe. The man turned to face us, and she ducked into the front door of my flat to avoid his stare. She pushed me, and I crashed back against my front door. How strange fate is. I was knocked down and imprisoned by a stunning person at the entrance. I waited in silence as the noise of footsteps from the other room subsided in this state. The last pair's footsteps were eventually drowned out by the sound of an elevator door opening and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I questioned her, softly pulling off her body. "Are you okay?" With a stunned expression, the stunning woman in her robe withdrew from me and took a seat. Her side profile was lovely, but a little depressing. "I apologize. In addition to making a mistake, I also started this annoyance. I truly wanted to take him by surprise." She apologized to me, lowering her head and gripping her robe tightly. One tear fell to the back of her tightly closed fist. I went to stroke her shoulder in an attempt to console her. But at that moment, the partially open front door flew open. "Star wishes on bamboo in honor of the Star Festival. Let's rejoice. Please give me a candle." Children dressed in robes were standing there, singing a joyful song and each holding a lantern. They extended their arms. All right," exclaimed the stunning woman dressed in a robe. She took out sweets from a plastic bag she carried and started giving them to the children. The kids gleefully rushed off toward the next house, carrying candies. It was uncannily similar to Halloween, and I watched the spectacle play out in silence. "Is this something like trick or treat?" I inquired with the attractive woman wearing a robe who was dropping off the kids. The robed beauty gave me a startled glance. She then spoke softly, as though knowing, "You're not from around here. This is a gathering for candles. Kids wander around houses like this on the day of the Star Festival in order to collect candy. The kids appear to be more interested in candies these days, but it seems like they used to really get candles back in the day." She held out her hand to me as she spoke. I was able to stand at last, thanks to her support. "I feel ashamed. I try my hardest, but it didn't work out," she remarked, appearing somewhat relieved. I made an attempt because I've been told since high school that I'm not cute. Rather silly, The attractive woman in a robe appeared to be a neighbor I knew a little bit. I reasoned that perhaps he might pick me among the other women. I'd wanted to console her since I was feeling down, but I was at a loss for words. She smiled slightly at me while I remained silent. She then repeatedly apologized to me and gave me a gift of a mound of candies. I ought to have gotten her name. With a gentle chime, the elevator doors closed, and I was little regretful. A week later, I saw the beautiful woman in a robe once more, this time at the manufacturing office. I didn't recognize her at first as she had changed so much in appearance. She introduced herself as, "I'm Alice Mitchell, the consulting attorney," as she put on her elegantly tailored black suit. The subtle yet expertly applied makeup looked great on her. Her lips were painted a delicate beige, but they were a charming pink when she wore a robe. "Thank you for the other day." When she whispered in a voice only I could hear, I had to look twice. She appears to be this factory's legal advisor. The plant manager says she's a very competent female lawyer who operates a law office close to the company residences. Alice approached me, startled by the sudden reunion, and said, "I wanted to apologize for the other day." You already know our friend," I replied. "Alice, pay attention. Alice has never been lucky when it comes to guys. She recently developed feelings for a young man. Having known Alice since she was a young child, the factory manager began to spread rumors about her personal life. Alice covered the manager's mouth with her palm in a panic to silence him. "You don't have to talk about that." Alice pouted at the manager of the plant, looking rather like a little child. She offered to apologize, and I chose to accept it. We decided to meet for supper and trade phone numbers. I realized that since coming here, I had never exchanged personal contact information before. I want to giggle thinking about our first meeting. I think she noticed that on my face. Alice, who was talking about her job, shot me a quick glance and said, "Don't." I shot her a sidelong glance of guilt. My heart was beating very strongly, and it felt like we were talking in private. Later, I got into a fight with Alice over food. It was a pleasant mood at first. Everything was going well until we had a little wine at this lovely Western restaurant on the harbor. I believe we were both feeling tipsy as the dinner was coming to a conclusion. I am not a good drinker. Although I don't think I have a nasty temperament when I'm intoxicated, I do have a tendency to express my genuine emotions a little. "Do you like younger men?" I asked Alice that out of the blue when she informed me she had split up with that man. The air around our table seemed to cool off by 2 degrees for a brief period of time. In spite of my impolite inquiry, Alice smiled maturely. What a rude man to ask something like that. She set her wine glass down on the surface. Our relationship's affected by age. However, isn't the man who lives next door a college student? Are you about 35 years old? Isn't that a little hazardous, Alice? I ran into the neighbor in the elevator the day following the disturbance, and we spoke briefly. The news that he was still a college student astonished me. Alice corrected me about her age. "I'm only 32, her voice trembling. "Are you serious? For a college student, there really isn't much of a difference between 35 and 32. It may look that both ages are old hags. It's true that alcohol can be frightening. I believe that at the moment I was merely attempting to get her attention. I kept pushing her boundaries with my remarks. It doesn't really help to regret it when you're sober, does it? I'm an old hag, but there's a big difference between 32 and 35. What in what way? Alice lost patience at that point. She glared at me as she got up from her chair. If you round up, there's a big difference between 30 and 40, you idiot. That's the point where my recollection stops. It seems like someone whacked me over the head with a baguette. I discovered the hard way that evening that even tough bread may be lethal. Alice has been ignoring me ever since that evening. She works at a legal office next to my apartment complex, and whenever she sees me on her way back, she turns to avoid eye contact. I'm trying to find the appropriate occasion to offer apologies, but I'm having trouble. I learned that my old main office coworkers were going to Anchorage around 6 months after I was moved to the plant. I was approached by an old coworker who proposed a meeting. It seems like they intended to come to this factory. I was excited to see my old coworkers, but my excitement was somewhat dashed when I learned that the former manager would also be there. The main office group arrived in Anchorage for their vacation a few days later. They also visited our factory, one of their suppliers, for a tour. It was good to see my former coworkers again, unaltered, and even solicited for advice regarding their jobs. I generally simply handled factory attendance, so everyone at the office was shocked to see me offering the elite guidance from the main office. "Hey Raymond, you're remarkably trustworthy. Why were you moved to this location?" I was graciously brought some Misty by the manufacturing manager. I gave a hazy response, saying that there were several reasons why things eventually cooled down. That day, Alice was also at work, and I could feel her watchful eyes. "Hey Raymond, come here." My former manager was the one who was so haughtily summoning me over. At the office door, he was waving at me. I sighed heavily and rose to follow his urging. "A long time has passed. I appreciate you being there the other day." A salutation with a tinge of irony. The former head of the section put on a pouting expression. It seems that he knew what he was doing. "You haven't told anyone, right?" In response to the manager's remarks, I gave a nod. The division head called me in and said the same thing when I was reassigned here and left the main office. I became tired of him always blaming me for turning the client over to my junior, even though it could have been his fault in the end. "Maybe you didn't remember, but you gave me the instruction to give the client to my junior, right? Additionally, I've heard that you were the junior's mentor." The manager appeared taken aback, not anticipating a response from me. Seldom did he say, "You're speaking too loudly. You do understand that it would be problematic if someone heard, right?" Panicking, the section head looked silly, and I couldn't help but laugh. A boss who installs his own subordinates and then gloats about it is not someone I need. That contract trouble, anyway, was your responsibility. You do realize that it has nothing to do with me. The section head abruptly ended the chat as my other employees who had completed the tour were congregating close to the office. I sighed heavily when I saw him re-enter the circle of the main company. I seemed to be harboring some residual affections for the headquarters. That was undoubtedly aided by being stimulated and re-establishing contact with former coworkers. A small part of me lamented not being able to go back to that circle. Alice was standing behind me and appeared to have been there for some time. I didn't mean to listen. It seems that she had heard me talking to the section head. Nevertheless, she declared, "Errors must be fixed. I've accepted that it's all in the past." I responded in a non-committal manner since I didn't want to deal with this matter once more. Alice gave me a worried look as she glanced at me. She looked at my face for a bit before letting out a tiny sigh. "Are you aware of the facial expression you're making? You seem to be quite depressed. Would you please be truthful? I'd prefer not to see your face." Raymond Alice pointed it out, and I hardly touched my face. It humiliated me to be seen looking that way. It's the most uncool thing ever to pretend to be regretting something while still having given up. I'm acting like I have no residual sentiments, which is incredibly uncool. I told Alice how I really felt, covering my shaking mouth with my hand. It seemed impossible for me to lie to her. "It's not a bad thing. It's acceptable to persist in pursuing your goals. Come back to where you belong. I'll assist you," Alice remarked, her words of encouragement beaming from her eyes. Saying thank you, I bowed my head. "Leave it to me," she smiled in response. Then a string of busy days started. I gathered proof of the manager's misconduct with the help of my former coworkers. It turned out that not only had I been held accountable for his errors, but other coworkers had also had their successes taken advantage of. As we investigated every illegal detail, the accusations continued to mount. Alice worked hard to get the paperwork ready to file the manager's accusation. Alice looked at the petition my former coworkers had started calling for my return to the headquarters and said, You're surprisingly popular despite being the kind of person who'd say such terrible things to me," looking surprised. It seems that she was still upset with me for what transpired that evening. I sincerely apologize for that moment. I drank too much because I felt anxious. I admitted. I got too intoxicated because I was anxious about spending time alone myself with you. Nervous about being with an old woman like me, she said with a giggle. I felt like Alice could look right through me. I took a big breath and looked up at her. That day, I really wanted to make a move on you, but I just couldn't say it. Alice smiled contentedly at what I had said. Then she abruptly ended the talk by saying, "We'll continue this later." My confession seems to have been ignored. Subsequently, the head office successfully accused. Alice was so happy to hear from me that she began saying, "I'm glad," over and over. I can now go back to the main office. That's excellent news, is it not? From my phone, I could hear Alice's voice with a trace of sadness. And with that, I decided. To cheer her up, I made the decision to board the final flight. I was eager to see Alice's face once more. I hurried to Alice's legal practice after grabbing a taxi at the airport. In the office, the lights were still on even though it was already late. I'm back. Alice had been working alone, overtime, when I knocked on her door at her law office. "Wow, you've returned already. Greetings on your arrival back to headquarters. When will you return?" Alice dropped the documents she was studying and began to spin her pen on her slender fingers. Her cheeks were flushed a little. "Are you going to bring in a secretary? I believe I could perform the task fairly effectively." Startled, Alice let her pen fall to the ground. "What? Why? How is the headquarters doing?" I choose to be truthful with myself. I informed her that I had filed my resignation and turned down the invitation to go back to head office. "All I want is to spend my entire life with you, Alice. Is that detrimental? There's no reason that would be bad." She gave a halting response. She probably showed me that it's okay to struggle toward the future you want, and that it's not something to be ashamed of. She also made me realize, for the first time in my life, how important it is to be true to yourself. "Yes, but you're not hiring here. Forward your resume to the management of the factory." Her tone abruptly changed to one of business, and I missed the reddening of her cheeks. She is my eternal partner in life. I want the future to be one in which she is at my side no matter what, and I will stop at nothing to make that happen.